Good afternoon YouTube, this is Warbles here. I'd like to have a bit of a chat about windmills. Specifically, I'm going to have a look at the gift windmill and I'm going to examine its mouth, right? Just as if it was a free horse. As you may be aware if you've been watching my channel, I did once spend the best part of 20 years figuring out how to make electricity with a motor car alternator and a hand-carved wooden turbine rotor. And it's a pretty complicated job, and it finished up fairly heavy, and I never got around to putting it up on the pole because I would need to make a whole new rotor with an extra 1 foot of blade on each tip. Right, and even then it would only start producing electricity in about 12 to 15 miles per hour worth of wind. Right, so when I was in the main street yesterday and a couple of friends of mine pulled up beside me and wound the window down and said, "Is there room in your car for a brand new wind turbine?" I said, "Yes, certainly there is, but I have no money." And they said, "Well, it's a gift." So let's go and have a look at the Chinese 300 watt rated electric wind turbine. Here we have it as received. Now we've got a cast aluminium hub, we've got a moulded nylon spinner, we've got a bucket with a beetle in the bottom of it, and we've got some nuts and bolts. Now we've got 3 bolts with nuts and washers and lock nuts for 2 of the blades. 1 blade is missing 1 bolt. We should have 3 of these little machine screws to hold the spinner on. 1 of them is missing. Okay, what a tragedy. I'll have to go back and ask them to have a look on the floor and see if they've got 1 bolt, 1 nut, 1 washer and 1 lock washer and 1 machine screw. That's no drama at all. We have an owner's manual. We have 3 interesting looking high-tech nylon blades. Now when you put them in a pack, you can see that all of them have had abrasion and impact damage at the same part of the leading edge very close to the hub. It's faintly possible that could be a problem, so I'm going to use some 5-minute araldite to infiltrate the nylon and reskin it and prevent water from gaining ingress, because if you get water in there it's likely to expand when it freezes in the cold of the morning, and it might just start to delaminate parts of the blade, but it doesn't seem to be a laminated blade. Now there's 3 of these blades, so I put them down and examine the hubs. There's no damage at the hub. There's a little bit of blue paint there. There's a very small bit of blue paint there. There's a bit more blue paint and an abrasion mark out there. So no great drama on the upwind side of the blades. We turn the blades over and examine the downwind side of them, and it's a slightly different story. Out here we have an abrasion mark and a slight scuffing. No real problem. In here we have some more of this blue paint. This one is undamaged, and this blade has copped a bit of an abrasion here, which has left a set of marks, 3 in number, and here we have the same set of 3 marks, and this one's even left some metal filings buried in the nylon. I have sanded it. Once again, it's going to get a skin of araldite just to prevent water ingress. Here we have some blue paint. My guess is that the 3 blades were mounted on the hub, dismounted from the turbine. They were tied up in a trailer or resting in the back of a station wagon, and it's made a trip from one town to another, maybe 150 kilometres there and 150 kilometres back, for exhibition at a country show or ag quip perhaps. This is also the source of some scuff marks on the nylon of the tail. Nothing that matters at all. Down here we've had a rope or something has picked up this fairing which screws on. You have to be able to take that off because the nylon tail conceals mounting bolts which are inside the fairing. So that's a minor piece of cosmetic damage. Another very minor piece of cosmetic damage is when it's been in the shop tied up with a bit of string to stop, you know, twirling around and bashing the customers in a gust of wind through the door. It's had some rope scuffs. And then there's another bit of a problem with the propeller shaft, but I'm going to pause it to get around there. Here we have the main propeller shaft, and as you can see it's got a piece of impact damage. Now I don't believe the rotor was fitted when this damage was incurred, because the nut would have protected the shaft and the thread. But what's happened is a piece of concrete has hit here, and when the piece of concrete has hit here, it has compressed this hole which exists for the purposes of having a split pin go through to retain the nut, so that you wind up with a tapered shaft. I'm fairly sure that there should be a spring washer behind that, and it's compressed the thread here. And the impact compressing the thread means that I've had to spend at least 15 minutes with a three-cornered rat-tailed file to clean up the threads in order to get that nut on. So I figure I'm up for one spring washer, one bolt, one nut, one ordinary washer, 1/4 inch spring washer, and one machine screw. And if I have to make the machine screw and re-tap the thread on the hub, considering that the retail price of these things is about $550, I have been given a marvellous gift by people who were shutting their warehouse, and this thing was just slightly too shop soiled to be able to be sold as a new wind turbine, and there's not much of a market for a slightly shop soiled second hand wind turbine. So my guess is they've written it off on their insurance, and it was either give it to me or throw it to the dump, right? Because it's not quite in perfect condition. So I'm really happy. I think one missing nut and a bolt and a machine screw and a couple of washers, well, 3 washers at least, maybe 4 washers, and that's just bloody lovely. So thank you very much, Cheryl and Danny at the Sustainable Shop in the old bank at Glen Innes Main Street. I think that's just the loveliest thing that anybody's given me for years. And okay, it's going to go up the pole, and I'll have to cut down a tree to make the pole, and probably cut down 6 more trees to give it some clear air. Happily, my tower of power, which at the moment has the equivalent of 4 30-watt panels up there. I mean, one of them's allegedly 60 watt, but it never ever put out 60 watts. So I've got 120 watts of solar power, and the plan is to pull the oldest allegedly 60 watt panel off and replace it with 2 more of those gallium arsenide panels. So I'm going to wind up with 5 30 watt panels for 150 watts of solar generating capacity. But as you can see, the south side of the tower is in fact flat. So I'm going to have to make a brace up there at the apex. And down here, guess what? Before I put the tower up, I already dug the hole. So that hole there, and okay, there's ants and there's all sorts of things. That hole there is so that I can fit this bifurcated piece of yellow box into the hole and then cut a gap in it, and this becomes the female half of the hinge for a wooden wind turbine tower. And the whole theory is that the wind turbine is hinged at the bottom, braced by the tower, and it should stick up into the clear air up there. So because I've been given a rinky-dink fancy neodymium boron iron style of a wind turbine with a permanent magnet alternator, that tree's got to go, and that tree's got to go, that threesome there's got to go, that one's got to go, that one's got to go, and that one's got to go. So we're looking at 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 wattle trees have to come down in order to get clear air for the wind turbine, and I'll wait until I finish building the tower and the turbine is ready to actually go up in the air before I take the wattle trees down. And I'm also going to have to go and cut the longest, tallest, straightest pole that I can and then wire brace it to use between ground level and where the steel pipe for the turbine mount starts. But yes, the Tower of Power is about to be graced with a Chinese 30-watt turbine, and it might be about as useful as one extra 30-watt panel, and whereas the 30-watt panel is $300, the turbine's $500. There are mechanical limits to how cheap you can build a windmill, and solar panels keep getting easier. On the other hand, a solar panel does not turn any wind into electricity. So late at night, when you've got a lot of wind after a couple of days of rain and you've got the generator running and you hear the wind howling through the trees, that's when you really, really, really wish that you had a solar panel. Okay? Sorry, you wish that you had a wind turbine, because a solar panel doesn't work at night. Sorry about that slip of the tongue, but you're dealing with a warbles who's had a couple of beers. Just getting used to the idea that there's not much wrong with a wind turbine. I'll go over and show you the one thing that was a worry to me. When this thing was in the shop, they had it on a short stand. And the short stand stuck a 53mm pipe up there. Now, to prove that it works, we have a multimeter, and what I'm going to do is turn the axle by hand, and as you can see, I can crank out 3 or 4 volts just spinning it by hand. So everything works, right? But there was a bit of a scare a couple of hours ago. Now, the scare came when I discovered that these 2 wires, there was a long wire and a short wire, and I thought, well, okay, maybe that's to prevent people from short-circuiting by accident. And then I had a much closer look, and I discovered that one of the wires has got these laceration type damage marks, and it's got 3 of them. And what's happened is when this has been put on a mounting stand, the wire has been pinched, and the mounting stand, because the wires are supposed to turn with respect to the windmill because there's a commutator up inside the bearing, but the outer heat shrink cover has been damaged on the wire, and I'm very pleased to be able to say that there is in fact a layer of nylon underneath the woven cover, and the damage only goes through to the woven cover. Now, I've used a dentist's angled mirror to check it. But the bottom line is, although it needs a few parts, there's no showstoppers. Warbles does not have to cobble windmills together anymore. He's now got a real one. Hee hee! Thanks. Won't the batteries be happy?